Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first Naturalist 101 of the fall. This program is part of our theme for this year and next year. It's Tour of the Coast, reintroducing ourselves to the Georgia coast and all the wonderful things that are happening along our coast. For all of you, I am Stephanie Tuning. I'm the education coordinator here at 100 Miles. So we want to give a big thank you to all of our members of 100 Miles because that helps support programs like this that we can offer to help educate here in Brunswick, and also all of you that are joining us online tonight. So we thank you all for coming. And you're not here to see me, you're here to see Kristen. So we'll go switch it over to her, and so she can share all about her work on Wassaw with the Caretta Research Project. So,
awesome, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you to 100 Miles for hosting me. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you to everyone who's here in person and online. So I'm just going to jump right into this. I have a lot of material to cover tonight. I am Kristen Zemaitis, as Stephanie said. I've been working with sea turtles since 2012, and I just started with the Caretta Research Project in 2023. My role here is a biologist or an ecologist, and also an education and communications coordinator. And then Chris Williams, our fearless leader, could not be here tonight. She is the director, so she actually began working with sea turtles in 1990 and was the director of the Caretta Research Project in 1996. And she is currently on Wassaw finishing up our turtle hatching season. So kudos to her for doing this for almost 30 years. She wishes she could be here. And the Loggerhead Sea Turtle is actually where we get our name. So the Caretta Research Project, I get a lot of questions about that. What is Caretta? Caretta is the scientific name of the sea turtle, if you were wondering. So in today's presentation, I'm going to talk about why sea turtles need our help. I'm going to probably skim through this pretty quickly. I think most of us here in the audience are very familiar with sea turtle ecology and why they need our help. So I'm going to skim through that, and then we'll talk about what Caretta does on Wassaw Island, how we operate, and then I'll go over some really cool findings that we've had from our research. So I'm going to just skim through some of these threats. We have, of course, beachfront development. We know that sea turtles need an ample amount of space on our beaches to lay their nests. We need to have enough dry sand. We cannot have an abundance of hotels or cheap beach chairs. Even retaining walls that are put up to protect development can hinder them from nesting. We also have beachfront lighting. So again, with development comes that added element of human lighting. This is really important because sea turtles use the ocean to navigate, and they use the reflection of light off the water. And so if there is a little bit of light from the moon or anything that's reflecting off, that helps them find their way, especially as hatchlings. But both hatchlings and adults have been documented going the wrong way when there's excessive lighting. So they end up in parking lots, they end up going towards hotels rather than into the ocean. This can be a huge issue. Here's an example of some before and after lighting. We've had a lot of people actually very willing to work with this. And so we use this amber colored lighting. It does help our sea turtles not to have as much of a hindrance when navigating to the ocean. Sea turtles can only see certain wavelengths of light, and so we do use red light on the beaches. You'll see a lot of our photos are taken at night. We do have red light in a lot of them, and so having these lower colors of light really does help the turtles. Commercial fishing is also another really big issue. They do get stuck in nets, they get caught on long lines, even just your average person fishing off the pier occasionally will catch a turtle. So this is something that we've been working on from an education standpoint. But there's also a turtle exclusion device or a trawler excluder device. So the original name was trawler excluder device. A lot of people now refer to it as a turtle exclusion device. But it's essentially installed into shrimping boats on trawlers, and it allows the turtles to kind of get out of the net like a trap door. So this is something that we've been working on for the better part of 40 years now, and we've seen a tremendous improvement in the numbers of bycatch being reduced. The original purpose of this was actually to reduce the capture of jellyfish. So we have a lot of cannonball jellies here. When shrimpers are out there trawling with their nets, they often get overloaded with jellies, and so this grate that they made actually allows things of a certain size to get through. So shrimp can get through the net, jellies, turtles, anything else larger than a shrimp basically gets expelled from the nets. They work really well. They are required to be on trawlers now, and they all get inspected to make sure that they're up to date. So why we need to protect sea turtles, I have an entire PowerPoint on this, so this will take an extra hour. So just know that sea turtles are extremely important for the ecosystem. Our healthy oceans really do depend on them. They are essentially a keystone species that influences the survival of other species through food webs and through ecosystem enhancement. And so both within the ocean and marine ecosystems and on the beaches. So there are some roles that are species specific as well. For example, a leatherback or a green sea turtle might have a different role than a loggerhead. But again, that's a whole other topic to get into. So I want to jump into the Caretta research project. We were with the Savannah Science Museum originally. The Savannah Science Museum is now closed. But that was who actually started the Caretta research project. And then we work a lot with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Wassaw Island LLC, and the Nature Conservancy. And so our goals are really just to learn more about sea turtle reproductive biology, to increase the survival rate of both eggs and hatchlings, and educate and involve the public. So two aspects of Caretta that make us really unique is that we are the longest continuously running saturation tagging program in the U.S., and we are a volunteer-based program. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. The longest continuously running saturation tagging program in the U.S. We are continuous, so we started at a certain date and have never stopped. That does not mean that we were the first, and that does not mean that we're the only ones doing tagging. It just means that we've been having about 52 years of data now, so we have the largest continuous data set, but we are not alone in this. And we also do saturation tagging. So there are a lot of projects on the coast that protect eggs and protect nests, but they do not encounter the females when they are laying the nests. So we are actually out there at night, and we're working with the females while they're nesting. So here's just a little recap of some of the other projects that are involved in the conservation of sea turtles on our coast. 1964, Jim Richardson, who is now a retired University of Georgia ecologist, first began cataloging nests on Little Cumberland Island. He lived there, he was just interested. He started collecting data. 1966, that should be 1966, yeah. Nest monitoring began on Blackbeard Island, 1972 Jekyll, and then 1973 Wassaw. So the Caretta Research Project started in 1973. We actually were not the first ones to be doing this, but we didn't stop for 52 years. And then in 1989, the State's Department of Natural Resources began collecting data statewide. And that formed Georgia Sea Turtle Cooperative. So the Georgia Sea Turtle Cooperative is actually along the entire 100 miles of the Georgia coast. It involves 13 barrier islands. And the purpose is to maintain the viability of marine turtle populations in Georgia. And so this is an awesome group of people. We all work together very closely. All the islands meet every year before the season. We have a pre and post-season meeting. So we have a pre-season meeting. We talk about what's changing this year in our protocol. What are we going to do collectively on the coast? And then our post-season meeting is, how did things go? What went wrong? How can we do better? Did you think of something in ingenuity that we need to all be thinking about for next year? So it's a really, really great group of people. A lot of great things have come from it, and I'm really glad that we all get to work together. So Wassaw National Wildlife Refuge is gorgeous. It is an island off the coast of Savannah, and I'll show a map here in just a second, but it is managed by Fish and Wildlife, and you cannot get to it with a vehicle. You actually have to have a boat. There are no roads, there's no development, it's very pristine. So we're right up here, just south of Tybee and Skidaway, up in Savannah, about an hour and a half from here in Brunswick. So the refuge itself is about 10,070 acres of salt marsh, mudflats, forests, dunes, and beach, and you can see that in the first picture there. It's a very large area that's protected by the Fish and Wildlife Service. But the actual island itself, which is here in the second photo, is 7 miles of beach and about 2,500 acres of beach, dune, and forest communities. Some beautiful photos of our island. I think everyone here has been to multiple barrier islands, so you're very familiar with the ecosystem. So we are also a volunteer-based program, and I want to talk a little bit about what our volunteers do and what it looks like on Wassaw. So we've had about 3,700 plus volunteers since 1973. And our volunteers range from about 14 or 15 in age typically to about 85. So our oldest volunteer this year is 85. We have about 102 volunteers if we are at max capacity. We also have had volunteers from all 50 states and 7 countries, which is awesome. We love getting to introduce different people to the Georgia coast and to the sea turtles. We've had about 45% of our volunteers actually be repeat volunteers. A lot of people come and just kind of do it once or twice and check it off their list, but 45% of them have returned for multiple years. I think right now our longest running volunteer has been coming for about 32 years. And there are quite a few that have been coming for decades. It's also really fun to see that a lot of them come back together. They meet friends, they meet each other out there, and they say, we're going to come back the same week every year, so that's really fun. A bonus of this is that me being there for only 2 years, I get to hear a lot about the history of Wassaw. I get to hear a lot about, just fun anecdotal things with the project and the volunteers. It's a really great community. We've also trained 30 interns, so it's just myself and Chris Williams, our director, and we're out there with an intern. So her and I rotate on and off 2 weeks at a time throughout the summer, and then we have a second person because we need to split up the beach in half, and we'll get to that in just a second. We also have a really large outreach program, and so in the off season when we're not out there with turtles, when they're nesting, we are doing a lot of education. We're going to schools, we're training teens how to present the material to younger groups as well. And a lot of these teens are now coming to the island to experience it for themselves. So this is, a very unheard of experience. I think typically you're going to see a lot of photos of turtles at night, but this turtle actually came up at about 7 p.m., which is odd. It's daylight, but this looks awesome, doesn't it? Like, how many of you would love to have this experience and have this photo, right? I need to make a disclaimer before I get into the rest of the presentation about how awesome Wassaw is and how you should all come to see turtles. There are a lot of bugs. We are out in nature. There's not a lot of development around us. We don't spray for mosquitoes. Gnats are really bad on the beach, and it's hot. We do not have air conditioning, so just keep that in mind when you're thinking about how awesome this is. I would love for all of you to come, but it is a very intensive work week. And so when we have volunteers come out, they are actually there for a full week. Every single Saturday we switch crews. We're there for 17 weeks of the year. So it's May through August, and every Saturday we have 6 new people come out. And so we have volunteer boat captains who actually transport all of our crew, our gear, everything back and forth between the Savannah dock to the Wassaw dock. And so this is something that you could potentially do if you own a boat or know somebody who would be interested in helping. We, as Caretta, a nonprofit, do not own our own boat, but it's awesome. We get to meet a lot of people. We bring everything over for the whole week. There's no store, there's no grocery shopping if you forget something, so we have to be very prepared ahead of time. And then the accommodations are 2 cabins. So we have, again, 6 people in there sharing a living space with bunk beds. We have no electricity. We do have solar power in one of the cabins. The other one does not have any electricity. So we are kind of living off of bare minimum. We do have an indoor toilet but an outdoor shower, and it is cold water only. But nobody complains about that. It's very hot. So at night, we actually patrol all 7 miles of the beach on our Kawasaki mules, and we're essentially looking for a turtle track or a turtle emerging. And we split the beach in half. This is why we would have an intern who can also take half the beach. So we'll have 3 volunteers on each vehicle, and we're driving up and down all night from about 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. We occasionally go in for a snack break or a bathroom break, but we are out there and we are busy. So when we encounter a turtle, we're checking for incanal and pit tags. So an incanal tag is this metal tag you see in the first photo here. It's an identification for the turtle. It does have 3 letters and 3 numbers on it. That's how we know what turtle we're seeing. Are they returning multiple times to nest? Are they nesting at consistent rates? And then if they don't have a tag, we're giving them the tag. So we're actually applying them. And that usually indicates that it's a new turtle. However, these tags do fall out from time to time. They do not last for 52 years. So when they fall out, they leave a star, and we can tell a turtle did at one time have a tag, so we'll reapply a new one. But we can also tell who she is because of the pit tag. And a pit tag is really similar to what you might have in your pet if you go to the vet and get a microchip. It's a grain of rice, really tiny, and we can scan that, and it tells us who the turtle is. So we have two different ways of identifying the turtle. So every single female gets identification. We also take a lot of measurements as well as biopsies. So the measurements are important for us to document growth. Are the turtles growing at a significant rate? Do they eventually max out and stop growing? And then we also are taking the biopsies to look at things like genetics, stable isotopes. We've taken blood in the past. It just depends on who we're collaborating with and what our research protocols are for that year. But you can see here there are some photos as well taken with white light. And I mentioned that we do not use white light. These are really old historical photos, and I thought it was fun to include some of them. So we do not do this anymore. We always use red light, but I think for also research purposes, there are occasionally some photos in the presentation that were taken with white light. We also take an egg from every single nest for genetics. And so this eggshell goes towards the genetics project that Dr. Brian Shamla is working on. He did a talk here last fall. His work is awesome. I'll mention that again in this presentation. But if you have a chance to go back and watch his presentation about turtle genetics, I highly recommend it. And so every single island on the coast actually takes an egg from every single sea turtle nest. And that gives us the mom's DNA. So we can put that into a larger database so we know where she's nested. Maybe someone in Florida picked up an egg in May, and then we picked up another one in August, and it's the same turtle, she's just nested in multiple places. So it's very important to have that large data set for genetics, and it expands for the entire nesting population of loggerheads in this area, which is from the tip of Florida all the way up to North Carolina and a little bit into Virginia. So the loggerhead sea turtle has an interesting life cycle and reproductive history. All 7 species of sea turtle have a little bit of a different life history. So for our loggerheads, they reach sexual maturity at about 25 to 35 years of age. So all those threats that we talked about, they have to spend 30 years battling every single one of those threats until they get to this age where they can actually lay a nest. And even then, they still have to deal with lighting and development. The average clutch size is about 120 eggs, and they will do this every 2 to 4 years. They're also going to lay about 4 to 8 nests per season. So we see typically 6 or 7 is really average for us on Wassaw, but it could be a little bit less if they're younger, it could be a little bit more, and that really depends on their body condition and how healthy they are. So think about how much energy it would take to produce 500 to 1,000 eggs per season. That's why they take such a large gap between 2 to 4 years. They have to go back to their foraging grounds, stock up on a bunch of nutrients, and then they come back and nest again. So it's estimated that about 1 in 1,000 hatchlings actually reaches adulthood. That number has fluctuated a little bit in the past depending on the level of threat. So at one point in time, we thought it was closer to 1 in 4,000 hatchlings, just because of all the pressure from fishing and other threats. So I have some fun videos here. If you've never seen a sea turtle dig a nest, I think people picture it kind of like a dog just digging in the sand really, really frantically. They're very methodical. They use both flippers, rear flippers, and they alternate. And they actually have the dexterity to scoop. So they make a scooping motion inside, and they bring out the sand and kind of toss it to the side. So there she is digging. This can take anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. If it's a really efficient turtle, sometimes they'll dig multiple chambers and they give up on it, depending on where they're digging, if there's like roots or things like that, or wet sand. This is a video of a turtle actually laying the eggs. And so there's not a whole lot of action going on, but you can see that her flippers are occasionally moving a little bit. And that's essentially like a contraction. So she's pushing the eggs out, and that's how we know when we approach the turtle that she is laying. So we can't collect any data on the turtle until she's actually laying the eggs. When they do start laying, they go into a trance, and they're pretty much oblivious to us. We can take measurements, we can check her tag and things like that, but if we disturb her before she starts laying, there's a chance that she'll abandon the nest and not lay. So we wait for that, and then here is a video of her covering. So again, they have a very methodical way of doing this, using every other flipper. And then towards the end, they'll really like pat it down to make sure the sand is packed in nice and hard. They also camouflage the nest pretty well, so this part can take anywhere, again, from like 2 minutes to an hour. It just depends on the turtle. But they will spend a lot of time kind of throwing sand around, making it look like they didn't nest or they just did. And so a lot of times when you first approach a crawl or a track from a turtle, it looks like she nested about 5 or 10 feet away from where the actual nest is. So it's just one of those things that with a trained eye, after years of doing it, you kind of know where the nest should be. After they lay the nest, we also protect it, and we put a screen over it. So we have 2 types of screens. We have one that's a really small mesh, like chicken wire, that prevents anything from digging in there, including ghost crabs, smaller things like armadillos and raccoons. And then there's this bigger net that actually covers up the smaller one, and the turtles can fit through there. So it looks like it's pretty small, but the hatchlings themselves are very small. And that, again, just protects predation. So on Wassaw, we do have all of these animals. Most common ones are raccoons, foxes, and coyotes. Since the coyotes have showed up, we do not have any raccoons or foxes anymore. So it's a little bit of a, sometimes we think it's kind of positive, but the coyotes do damage as well. And then even our ghost crabs can get hatchlings. So we also relocate a lot of nests. This is a picture of some volunteers here with a bunch of the eggs laid out. We count them all. We would have to relocate a nest if it was laid in a spot that's not good for the incubation period. So if we think it's going to get washed over at any point in time, if the eggs do become inundated with water, they cannot breathe, and then they will stop developing. So we do occasionally relocate. The incubation period is about 55 days, and then they emerge. This is the start of a boil. A boil is when the hatchlings all come out. Usually it's about 50 to 100 of them emerge at the same time. And you can see here that screen is still on, so they actually can fit right through that screen. I have a little video of a boil.
Wow, there's so many.
So hatching usually starts sometime in mid-July and goes through about September to October.
Oh my goodness, look at them.
And this happens very quickly. So whereas a female turtle can spend up to 2 hours on the beach nesting, for them to pop out and run to the ocean, it takes like maybe 10 minutes, if that. So this is something that we do try really hard to catch when we're out there. We're checking on nests and seeing if they're close to hatching. Here it is. Making his first spin. And then here is from an excavation that we did during the day. They do typically hatch at night. It's really hot. The sand actually is too hot for them to crawl on during the day. But occasionally we do an excavation and we find a bunch of live hatchlings still in there. So an excavation is when we go into the nest, we do essentially an inventory. We're digging it out, we're looking at how many eggshells are in there, how many hatchlings are alive, how many hatchlings are dead. And that data is all very important for conservation and making our management plan updates. So I have some fun Wassaw stats. We do not just have loggerheads, we've had a couple of other species as well. So we've had 7 different green sea turtle individuals with 11 nests and 461 hatchlings total. We've had 2 leatherbacks a very long time ago. I don't know, although North Carolina had several leatherbacks this year, so they are very, very large turtle, the largest of the 7 species. We've had 2 nests and about 63 hatchlings emerge. The Kemp's Ridley is the smallest and most endangered. We've had 1 Kemp's Ridley nest with just 36 hatchlings. And then loggerheads, we've had about 2,137 individual turtles. About 6,286 nests, and well over 400,000 hatchlings emerge. And that's in 52 years. So again, this is really important data. Without all of the excavations and tagging, we would not know any of these stats. This is how we keep track of the population over years. We also have one really special turtle. She's a hybrid loggerhead Kemp's Ridley, and she is named Miles. So Kemp's Ridley is on the bottom here. It's smaller, more gray coloration. They nest during the day. On top we have our loggerhead. They nest at night. They're larger. They have more like an orangey brown tone. and a very, very large head. And so the picture on the far side there is actually our hybrid. And she has nested both during the day and at night. So in 2018, 2022, 2024, we've seen her nest at night multiple times. And then in 2020, she nested during the day. And that just happened to be by chance that somebody was on the beach and saw her. We are not usually patrolling the beach during the day. So that was a really lucky catch. We've confirmed 12 nests total on Wassaw. And she is the only confirmed hybrid in Georgia, although that could be changing very soon. With the genetics research, we're actually starting to see more of the hybrids pop up in Florida, so there could be more of them. This is a picture from this year from one of her nests of the hybrid hatchling next to a normal loggerhead. So we know who the mothers are. We don't currently know who the fathers are. We will later when the genetics come back later in the season. It'll probably be somewhere around January, so you can check back for updates on that. But we know that the hybrid hatchlings are much smaller. They have a much skinnier head, and they're a little bit shorter, so they do resemble the Kempscribblies a little bit more. So since 1973, we've had a lot of contributions. I probably don't have time to go over all of them, but I'll highlight some of the research. We've contributed data for the 2009 and 2019 recovery plans for the Northwest Atlantic Loggerhead Sea Turtle. We provided data, support, and infrastructure for about 60 plus publications, 5 PhD dissertations, and 6 master's theses. We've also authored 30 research presentations at 15 regional and international symposia. So I, again, do not have time to go over all of this, but I'll cover a little bit of it. So here's just like a general trend in the loggerhead sea turtle recovery. The timeline, 1978, they were listed as protected under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. And then in 2004, we had a record low number of nests. So that was a pretty serious year where like something's definitely not right. We were seeing declines for a long time. And then in 2022, we had over 4,000 nests, which is 11 times higher than our low. So it's a very short time period. It's less than 30 years if you think back to our sea turtle life history. It takes about 30 years for sexual maturity. But a lot of things have gone into that. And so here is a graph of the entire Georgia coast, our trends in nesting numbers. So you can see there, this only goes up to 21, but in 2020 we had just under 4,000, and then in 2022 we had over. And so every couple of years we have a really big spike, and you can see that same thing here on Wassaw. So just with our nests here, and this is through 2023, I believe. You can see that every couple of years we have a spike, and then we'll have 1 or 2 years of lower nests. And so next year is predicted to be a very big year for the Georgia coast. So we're very excited about that. We're hoping we can beat our previous record from 2022. We do have a lot of research collaborations going on as well. So we have the University of Georgia with a genetics project that I've mentioned a couple of times. We have the University of Florida that has a nutrition project. And then the Georgia Southern University, which looks at sex ratios. And so for Florida, we have nutrition studies. We actually take biopsies from a lot of our turtles. We'll take skin samples, blood samples, things off their shell, documenting as much as we can because we're actually seeing the physical mom when she's nesting. And this can help us look at where they're foraging and their reproductive output. So remember I mentioned that they really need to forage for as much as they can before they can come back and nest, and that can impact our survival a lot. So if they're nesting every 4 years, we're going to see a slower growth. If they're nesting every 2 years, we're going to see a higher population growth. So it's very important to understand where they're eating, what they're eating, and how we can help to manage that in those foraging areas as scientists. There are 3 distinct areas where they forage with the Mid-Atlantic Bight, the South Atlantic Bight, and Southern Florida. Most of the turtles on Wassaw are actually foraging in the Mid-Atlantic Bight, which is a very productive area. And again, this contributes to larger clutch sizes. So I mentioned that the average nest is 120 eggs. Sometimes we'll see 108. It just depends on the turtle. With Georgia Southern University, they were studying sex ratios, and so this started in 2000. And this is important because the temperature of the environment actually determines the sex of the sea turtle. They do not have genes the same way that we do that determine the sex. And so warmer temperatures produce females, and cooler temperatures produce males. So if you can imagine that they're incubating in the middle of July and August, we're probably going to get a lot of females. Earlier in the year, in May and June, we typically see some more males. And so the goal here was just to estimate the sex ratios. You can't actually tell when they're hatchling just by looking at them or doing an external examination if they are male or female. But we put data loggers in 440 nests over a couple of years on Blackbeard and Wassaw. And we had about 30% of these were indicating that we had temperatures producing males. It was usually in the beginning of the season. So we think that it's really important that we have a variation in nesting so that we still have males available in our population to mate 30, 60, 90 years from now. Especially since a lot of the nesting habitat for loggerheads is in a warmer climate. So Florida, for example, has a lot higher temperatures, especially South Florida, than we see here in Georgia. We think they are producing mostly females. Around the world, this is a concern for all sea turtle species. There's also a significant increase from 2000 to 2010, so you can see here the temperatures. We've seen about a total overall increase of 1 degree Celsius in our data, and so that is producing a lot more females. We do still do this. So this publication was from 2010, but we're still to this day putting data loggers in every single nest that is on our list of study sites. So we have about 30 of them this year. That could change in future years, but we're just doing a sort of long-term data set to see how much these nests are changing. And we do it in a variety of areas. So we have our dunes that are really up higher and they have a higher temperature. We have some flat beach that has actually a little bit lower temperature. So we're trying to get a good measure of all those different habitats. Georgia Southern University also was looking at multiple paternity. And so in 2008 and 2010, they did research. We found that 72% of nests were fertilized by more than one male. The average was 2.65 fathers per nest, but we had up to 7 in one nest. And so just from this study alone, we had 175 individual fathers identified, but we still don't really know how many males are in the population. We see the females, we know they come up in nests, we can get DNA from the eggshell from them, but it's really hard to tell who the father is if we've never had the DNA marker identified. And so that's something new that we're working on with Dr. Brian Shamlin. But essentially the females are going to mate earlier in the spring before they come and nest. So typically in like April and May, they'll mate with males and they kind of like meet up in the ocean in an area where there's a big population of them migrating. So the males will kind of hang out with the females to migrate, and they might not have to mate again until the next time they're ready to nest in several years. So they can mate early in the year, lay all of their nests, 7 or 8 of them, without meeting again. So the University of Georgia also has this genetics project that I mentioned multiple times, Dr. Brian Shamlin. There's so much data. It's really, really awesome. It's helped us a lot with all of our management plans. But the genetic tag database is something that we get both from the eggshells and the biopsies. So the eggshell is something that every single nest has along the entire coast and in all the states that I mentioned earlier. With the biopsy, we can only get and see the turtle. So we are taking these. I think Jekyll Island is also doing that. So we're able to get a more clean sample of the DNA, and we can gather a lot more information from that. We also have noted, I think this is updated in 2022 or 2023, because we're waiting on some data to come back. We've had 40 first-generation nesters just in 1 year. And so this year, I think we've had about 42 or 43. Other years we've seen as many as 60, and a first-generation nester is someone who's never before showed up in the genetics database. She's never been tagged before, so it's essentially a new turtle that's recruiting into the population. And so it's really great to see that. We know that conservation is working. We know that there are new turtles arriving, but it took us 30 to 35 years to know that what we were doing was actually working. There was a chance that what we were doing could have not worked, and we wouldn't have been able to tell for a very long time. So we're very happy to see that. We know that we're going to continue to protect our sea turtle nests. We've also documented at least 35 full sisters nesting in Georgia. That's a pretty big deal if you go back and think about how many hatchlings actually survive to adulthood. We said 1 in 1,000, it could be less than that, but all those threats for full sisters from the same nest, the same mom and the same dad, to make it through all of those trials for 30 years and then come back to nest. And so we think what's probably happening is there are some lineages that are much stronger and more evolved than others. They're more physically fit for whatever reason. They're being a lot more successful. And I'll come back to this in just a little bit. We also found that there are different nesting strategies. So you probably have heard that sea turtles always come back to where they were born, to nest. That may or may not be true. So one thing is that we have the magnetic field of the Earth shifting all the time, and they use that to navigate. So what the magnetic field looked like in 30 years ago is not what the magnetic field looks like today. So they might not be going exactly where they were born. And we really don't know how to tell unless we have genetics and we say, oh, your mom nested on Wassaw 30 years ago, and now you're nesting on Wassaw. So with these 3 distinct patterns, we have a lot of turtles that actually do come to Wassaw. So an example here is a turtle shown in the first picture that nests exclusively on Wassaw. She lays 7 or 8 nests every time she comes, and it's almost always on the north end of the beach. So she's very consistent. She knows where she likes to nest. Another pattern we've seen is that turtles kind of bop around a little bit, but it's still within a pretty close proximity. And so we'll have Wassaw turtles occasionally go up to like Wassaw or Ossabaw or Sapelo. They're still staying on the Georgia coast, just maybe on like a neighboring island. And then the other extreme pattern is a turtle that went 675 kilometers away to nest. So she went all the way up to North Carolina. She might be a newer, younger turtle who's still figuring it out, not really sure. There could be something going on with her ability to navigate, not really sure. But these are patterns that we have seen time and time again. We have seen that Wassaw's nesters have nested on at least 15 other beaches in 3 states. 78% of these were on Ossabaw, St. Catharines, Blackbeard, and Sapelo. And then again, that farthest distance was 675 kilometers. We also have a new project that we just started with satellite tagging. And so we've done 3 turtles so far. I have 2 of them up here. And we're gonna do some more in the next couple of years, hopefully to ramp this up a bit. But we're really interested in looking at foraging and nesting behaviors. So where are the turtles going in between nesting? Are they sticking right around Wassaw? Are they going out into the ocean? Are they going into the marsh to feed? So some interesting data there. And then also the genetic history from Dr. Brian Chamberlain can help us figure out where these turtles are going and how they're related. We did partner with both the Sea Turtle Conservancy and OSearch on this, and so if you go to either of these websites, you can view the tracks of our turtles and see where they've been and where they are right now. I don't think I'm connected to the Wi-Fi, so I cannot pull it up, but that's okay. That's okay. You can share. Yeah, we can share. We'll share links later. So essentially, Buffett is really far up north right now, in that area of the Chesapeake Bay, I believe, and then Caroline, her tag actually stopped transmitting in August of last year, and then it restarted transmitting in December, and then it stopped again in January. So we think that there's probably some biofouling going on with her tag, which means there's like a barnacle or algae or something preventing the signal. So she might reappear, but Buffett is still active, so you can actually track the turtles' movements and see where they're going. Caroline stayed very, very close to Wassaw in between nesting. She was just in the marsh, kind of foraging right behind the south end. Buffett went back and forth between a couple of different islands. So we won't know until we get the genetics data back, but we think she probably nested on a couple other islands in Georgia as well. But they both came back to Wassaw multiple times. We got to see that the tags were still attached. They looked great. We got some good photos. And one thing I want to share about Caroline while we're talking about genetics. So they both have sisters or half-sisters. We know that from Dr. Brian Chamberlain's work. Buffett has a couple of half-sisters floating around that have also made it to adulthood, and so that means that her lineage probably is pretty strong. Caroline seems to be part of a larger family group and has really awesome genetics, and we're very excited about that because both of these turtles were totally chosen at random. We had a satellite tag. We had extra people out to help, and we said the first turtle we see is getting a satellite tag. And Caroline has like one of the coolest stories. So she has now 4 full sisters nesting that have all recruited within the last few years. And so that's awesome. So that, again, really, really strong genes there from both the dad and the mom. And they're all recruiting on islands very, very close to Wassaw, on Blackbeard, Sapelo, and Ossabaw. And so we think that there is some really strong homing going on. They are coming back to the same area where they were all hatched from, because Caroline's mom is also a Wassaw turtle, and we still see her. And so Caroline's mom was actually nesting on a 4-year cycle for about 15, 16 years. So we think that was maybe during a point in time where she wasn't foraging as well. She had like a really long lag between nesting. And then she disappeared completely for 12 years. We thought maybe she didn't make it. She did not show up anywhere in the genetic database for 12 years. And then she came back and nested again in 2018. Both of her rear flippers are now lame. So she probably had some sort of boat strike accident that has caused her rear flippers to be paralyzed. And so she does come back up and she tries really hard to nest, but she cannot dig a nest. And so we have, we can try to help her, but a lot of times it's so discouraging and it's exhausting for her that she can't. So she has not successfully nested. And what happens then is a lot of times they'll just drop the eggs in the sand or in the ocean because biologically they have to get rid of them at a certain point. But that means that Caroline's bloodline and her still nesting and her sister's nesting is maybe even more important. They might have been some of the last turtles to survive that their mom laid. And so we really hope to keep seeing her and learn more about her sisters, but this is just something that we would never know if we didn't have genetic data. So really awesome story there. And again, I hope she comes back and we can, maybe tag her again, get some more data from the satellite tag. So I want to wrap it up so we have some time for questions, but a lot of questions we get are, what can I do to help with sea turtles? You can always participate. So we do have a volunteer program if you'd like to come out and participate for a week. We'd love to have you. It's a lot of fun. Just remember, it's hot and buggy. You can also volunteer as a boat captain. We do rely very heavily on our boat captains for all of our transportation. You can just educate people in your life around the beach about lighting, fishing, not having dogs off the leash, things like that to help protect our sea turtle nests. You can always call authorities if you find a nest or a stranded turtle. We do see quite a few strandings as well. Typically they're injured from a boat strike or a fishing line, things like that. You can help to clean up the beach. Clean Coast is a project that actually has a lot of beach cleanups in the area. They go to all different islands. It's a really great organization to participate in. And also just educating boaters about boater safety and watching out for things like whales and turtles and manatees. So with that,